back. We are back with Live from the Heartland on this pre-election day weekend. I hope everybody's gotten all the mail that comes through and the robocalls, which haven't been as much as they will be in November. But this is one of those times, primary election, where there's a bunch of names on the menu, as it were, that you've never heard, or that you, unless you've been paying close attention, you might not know what your choices are. So one of those names, one of those people is sitting right across from us, Judge Jerry Esrick. Welcome to Live from the Heartland.
Thanks for having me.
Good morning, Jerry.
It's a pleasure. You're going to get closer to that
Okay.
mic, sir. Jerry, you were appointed to the court.
I was appointed to the by the Illinois Supreme Court at the recommendation of Justice Mary Jane Tice, and she has a blue ribbon commission that she has investigate the credentials of judges who are in line for appointment by her, and so that was how the appointment worked.
And what judicial position were you appointed to?
I was appointed to a full circuit position. So there
That's the Ninth Sub-Circuit?
Yes, I was appointed to a vacancy in the Ninth Sub-Circuit, yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's the judicial position you're running for?
Yes, I'm running in the same vacancy that I was appointed to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do all judges, okay, so you just exampled for us a way to ascend to the court appointment. How many of the sitting judges got there by appointment and how many by election? Do you know that offhand?
I don't know that offhand, but the appointments are only good through the next election.
Right, okay.
So your appointment is for a limited period of time, no matter when you're appointed.
Okay, and given that the electorate, most of them do not appear before judges very often in their lives, there is a
Both
high...
of us have, though.
Well, we've done our part for white people. But yeah, I mean, one of the major inequalities in our society is the fact that who walks into judge chambers, I mean, into courtrooms, are defendants who are often people of color and lawyers who are not. And so, how are we to know? How do people find out? And what do you think people should find out before they actually commit to a vote for a judge?
Well, that's, the difficulty in answering that question, I think, suggests that maybe this process of electing judges isn't a particularly good one. So
yeah, I think that was hidden in the question.
Yeah, and I think that's true. What you have is you have judges running for office who have to do all of the things you'd prefer judges didn't do, like raise money and curry favor with political leaders and that sort of thing. And then you're asking people to choose amongst those folks, and they have no idea what the criteria are for choosing and very little way of finding out about who the people are. So I think the whole system for electing judges is probably not a very good system. Of course, in Cook County, you'd be worried about making appointments that might be political, but I think there are ways to structure appointments like Justice Tice has that would make them more objective, and you'd have better people chosen.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to know, just as like a primer to begin with, how is the judicial system set up? I mean, do we have city courts? Do we have county courts, state courts? Tell us a little bit about what it is and how the Ninth Judicial Sub-Circuit fits into that.
Okay, so let me start first by saying that there's 3 levels to the courts in Illinois. There's the Supreme Court, then there's the intermediate appellate courts, and then there's the trial courts. And the trial courts are generally county courts. At least in Cook County, they're county courts. In other judicial sub-circuits throughout the state, it might be a combination of counties. But in Cook County, we have a county court system. It's, I think, the largest unified court system in the world. There's about 450 or so judges in the court system, and you can become a judge in the county court system one of 4 ways. You can be appointed for a limited term like I was. You can be elected countywide. You can be elected by geographic sub-circuit, which is a smaller geographical area within the county, or you can be elected by the other judges. And the people who are elected by the other judges are called associate judges. There used to be a greater distinction in terms of service between associate judges and full circuit judges. Now I think assignments really do not depend upon whether you're full or associate. But those are the 4 different ways that you can become a judge in Cook County.
How did you end up becoming a judge? I know you got appointed to that position, but what made you want to be a judge? I mean, you were a lawyer. You have a pretty strong progressive liberal background. Abra Mikva has been in your camp. A number of people, Jan Schakowsky, David Orr, Larry Sufferton, have come out in support of you. How did you end up wanting to be a judge and then becoming a judge?
Well, I think it goes back to Abner Mikva, to be honest with you. I worked
Some
for
of
him.
the people here may not know who he is, so fill us in on that.
Yeah, so Ab Mikva was a very progressive, independent Democrat who bucked the Daley machine back in the 60s and 70s and eventually ran for Congress from Hyde Park, was gerrymandered out of his district. We talked about gerrymandering a little earlier today, was gerrymandered out of his district by the Daley machine and came up to the North Shore and ran in the old 10th Congressional District and really changed politics on the North Shore.
He affected, single-handedly, he affected more people and brought more people, young people, into the process than anybody I know I've ever heard mention on the
Right.
North Side.
And those young people are now 60-year-old guys like me
Exactly.
who, following his lead, I at least wanted to do some public service at some point in my career. That is what made me, at this point in my life, start to look around for ways in which to give back to my profession, to give back to my community, and to do some public service. And some folks I know who are judges talked to me about the process, thought that I would be someone who'd be good at it, and so that's why I decided to do it.
You know, the two things I wrote down while you were talking, and one, let's do them separately. What is what is your take on the role of compassion on the part of a judge? How does compassion play a part in? I mean, you know, right now I think you're doing traffic.
I am in the traffic division, yeah.
And
That's where all the new judges
Please,
start.
please
right.
have compassion. Please.
Yeah, I mean, the parking is rough in this town. There's a lot of things, you know. So just let's talk about the role of compassion in the legal system.
Well, let me give you an example of that in terms of one of the things that we do in the traffic division. One of the types of cases we handle are misdemeanor DUI cases, whether they involve drugs or alcohol. And as a result of handling those cases, there are thousands of people who are sentenced to supervision as a result of a DUI offense. That supervision will require them, within a period of time, to do certain drug treatment classes, to do random urine testing, to do what's called a victim impact panel, which is a seminar or a class where they learn about the impact of their behavior on others. And we are seeing in a call every day people who do not comply with the terms of their supervision. So they're not doing their classes, they're not doing the things they're supposed to do. And in dealing with those people, of course, there are judgment calls one has to make all the time. A lot of times people aren't doing it for financial reasons because they're required to pay for the treatment that they're sentenced to. And if they can't get the money to
Perfect.
do it, to institute their treatment, then they can't begin it, their supervision drags on, they don't make any progress. So I think it's important for a judge to be aware of what the financial constraints are in these folks, of what their lives are really like, to be compassionate, to be firm. In a very few minutes, you have to size up the defendant in front of you and try to say the thing that will get them to make progress on what it is they're supposed to be doing. And I think that's a talent that requires life experience. It requires some sensitivity to what people go through in the real world. It requires experience. So I think those are things that are important for judges to have.
Take a sip of that pop, I guess. And let me ask you another one. We hear a lot, sometimes it's from the, I guess it could be from a lot of sides, but what about judicial activism? It's just an observer of courts and the judicial systems in the country. Do you think it's really an issue? Has it played a role? Is it a good role? Is it a bad role?
You know, it's hard to even know what judicial activism means. Judicial activism was a criticism that conservative or Republican judges used against progressive judges. But if you look at the current Supreme Court, it's probably the most activist court
Yeah.
we've had in many, many years. So,
Way.
you know, the judicial branch is different than the legislative branch and the executive branch. Making judges elected some ways makes it more political and more like those other two branches, which is what I don't think we need. The point of having a judicial branch is that judges are required to follow precedent, that judges are required to be consistent with what the law is, to follow the law, and to observe certain principles. And I think that's important. That makes what we do different than what the legislative body does and the executive body does.
Right now, you're doing traffic cases. I imagine I've been in some really interesting. Someone should make more movies about what goes on in traffic court. But where would you
More traffic
want to
court movies.
end up in your if you are elected to the Ninth Sub-Circuit again? Do you want to be on the criminal side? Do you want to be on the civil side? How do you see it evolving where you would end up and be doing most of your work once you are reelected, if you are?
Well, the criminal side is certainly very intriguing, and doing the misdemeanor DUIs, which we do now, involve all of the issues of civil liberties that you would have in any criminal courtroom. But my expertise is in civil law. And I have an unusual expertise for the bench, having done civil law all of my life, both injury work and commercial litigation. And I think really I have the best to offer on the bench by going into either the Chancery or law divisions. Those words won't mean a lot to non-lawyers, but those are the places where civil, commercial, sophisticated civil and commercial cases are heard. And that's really where my expertise is. So I think the best way I could serve would be in places like that.
So do you get, I guess in the Cook County Sub-Circuit, Ninth Sub-Circuit, you're not going to get too many cases of citizens filing suit on Monsanto, for example.
Well, no, that's actually not true. First of all, I should say that where you're elected from has nothing to do with where you're going to serve. You could be elected in the Ninth Judicial Sub-Circuit.
point.
You could serve anywhere in the county. That's up to the chief judge, and the chief judge is who makes the assignments after consulting with
Who is
division
the
heads.
chief judge now?
Tim Evans. So that where you're elected from has nothing to do with where you serve. But no, we have a very sophisticated commercial climate here in Illinois. We have a sophisticated commercial economy. There are lots of business and important commercial lawsuits that are being heard in Cook County all the time. There are lots of political lawsuits being heard. I'm sure you guys know that a few months ago, Governor Quinn withheld the salaries of the legislator as a way to pressure them on the pension issue.
Right.
That issue was heard. The
Went to the
constitution
court.
of that issue was heard in the Chancery Division of the Circuit Court of Cook County initially.
Right.
I went to new judges school in December, and it was a very intense, interesting program. But amongst the presenters, there was nobody presenting who had the type of civil experience that I've had as a lawyer. I don't say that by way of boasting. I said that's just the reality. There are very few people with my kind of experience who are willing to leave a successful law practice and run for judge.
There's the other salient point that people need to hear, that you are choosing to do this when, and you and other people on the ballot, I presume, are choosing to do this over the private sector in a way.
Right. I think what you'll find is in Illinois, there's kind of been a career path that you go from a public defender or a state's attorney to be on the bench. And there are lots of wonderful, very knowledgeable people who come out of those sectors who are on the bench doing a great job. But I think for balance and for expertise, we'd be better off if we had more people come out of private practice, come out of civil private practice to serve on the bench. And it's difficult to ask someone who's had a successful legal practice to take a salary cut, to run for office, to subject themselves to a grueling campaign, which is what this has been. And that's one of the reasons I stepped forward to do it, because there are so few people who've had my kind of career who are willing to do it.
So I know there's stiff competition in this particular ward because we've got competing interests in this race.
All under the big tent.
All under the big tent of the Democratic Party of the 49th Ward. How many people are running for this exact same position?
There are 3 vacancies in the 9th Sub-Circuit. So and in my vacancy, there are 2 other folks running, so 3 total. In one of the vacancies, there's 5 people running.
Right, and that's also got, is that the one where Michael Strom is
Yes,
running?
yes.
And yeah, he's a local guy.
And Abby's running.
And Abby Romanek.
Yeah,
That's a very
we were
tight-
in this ward. There's some division among the so-called progressive Democrats, and that's true in your case.
Yeah. It's kind of surprising to me. I'm the ACLU member in the race. I'm running against the state's attorney. I kind of wonder about the progressives in the ward, but
well, we got to be careful about how much detail we get into. But let me ask you, with an overview of someone who's watched all this, how would you evaluate the overall judicial team in all of these courts, the judges in general? Do we have good judges? Do we hear about bad judges? But we know there are good judges. How's the general, if you were just picking people, how does it look?
Well, let me say this. I think it's very uneven. I think part of the reason it's so uneven is because of the way we select judges,
Thank
because
you.
of the election process. I think we would do better if we had a different way of selecting judges. You know, Mike, I got to tell you, I love being a judge, but I wake up in the morning asking myself, what am I doing running for public office? And I think it's a real disincentive for folks who've had my kind of experience and my kind of career from doing it. And I think the quality of the court reflects that a little bit.
Well, Jerry Esrig, you're a wonderful man. I'm glad to have gotten to know you. And good luck to you in the race on the 18th. That's coming up in a few days.
This is Tuesday. Today is actually the final day for early voting.
Right.
And what
At
time?
Potawatomi Park. Get on over there.
Yeah. If you have any doubt that you'll be able to get to the polls on Tuesday, get to the polls today. Come on. Be one of the 10 of us that votes. Sorry. I'm sorry.
And Jerry, you get back out there and shake hands.
Great, I will. Thank
All right,
you.
Jerry Esrig, you're a wonderful man. Glad to meet you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a short musical break.